Most people believe that spiritual awakening is about adding more meditation, more content, more practices, more routines, more proof that they're doing the inner work. But Carl Jung would have smiled at that idea, because real awakening doesn't begin when you add. It begins when you subtract, when you quietly remove everything that dilutes your soul, everything that keeps you performing instead of living, everything that keeps you small, pleasing, exhausted, and disconnected from the woman you were always meant to become. This video is not about 9 new habits to force into your life. It's about the 9 things spiritually awakened women remove, silently, bravely, and without apologizing, before it's too late. And too late doesn't mean the end of life. It means the end of your life, the one that could have been lived with clarity, depth, intuition, and unshakable self-respect. There comes a moment in every awakened woman's journey when she realizes something powerful. I don't need to fix myself. I need to unburden myself, not polish, not perfect, not prove. Just remove what never belonged to her in the first place. And when that begins, when the old layers fall, when the noise drops, when the masks slip, she doesn't become someone new. She finally returns to herself. Jung called this process individuation, the slow and sacred unfolding of your true self beneath years of conditioning, performance, comparison, and inherited expectations that were never yours to carry. But individuation is not glamorous. It doesn't photograph well. It doesn't get applause. It's quiet, raw, and sometimes lonely. Yet it's the only path that leads a woman back to her inner authority, her intuition, her meaning, her real power. And the journey doesn't start with doing more. It starts with removing what blocks yourself from rising. Today, we begin with the first thing spiritually awakened women let go of, sometimes suddenly, sometimes slowly, but always with a sense of deep inner truth. Because once you see this pattern, you cannot unsee it. And once you release it, your entire energy begins to rearrange itself. Take a breath, slow down, feel into your body. Let part 1 open a door inside you. Let's begin. The first thing spiritually awakened women remove isn't a habit, a routine, or a mindset. It's something far more dangerous. Something she's been taught to hide so deeply that she doesn't even notice when she's doing it. She removes the suppression of her dark truths. For years, for decades, she's been told that a good woman is calm, gentle, forgiving, understanding, endlessly patient, emotionally tidy, spiritually pleasant, and always available to smooth the edges of the world. So she learned to swallow what felt sharp, to dim what felt intense, to silence what felt inconvenient, to smile while her stomach tightened, to nod while her chest burned, to hold back the sentence she wanted to scream, to bury the instincts her body was begging her to follow. Jung called this hidden reservoir the shadow. All the truths, emotions, memories, impulses, and intuitions that you were taught to deny because they didn't fit the version of you that made others comfortable. But here's the secret every awakened woman eventually discovers. Your shadow isn't the dark part of you. It's the part of you that was shamed into the dark. And suppressing it has a cost. It costs clarity, because you can't see clearly when you're scared of your own vision. It costs boundaries, because you can't protect yourself while pretending nothing hurts. It costs power, because a muted truth is a muted life. Every spiritually awakened woman remembers the moment her dark truths finally clawed their way to the surface, not gently, not poetically, but with a primal, holy force that says, "I'm done lying about what I feel." That's the beginning. She stops pretending she's not angry, stops pretending she's not disappointed, stops pretending she's over things she's not over, stops pretending someone's behavior didn't cut her, stops pretending she's fine with crumbs, stops pretending she's above her own humanity. The world calls this shadow work, but for her, it feels like resurrection, and it looks radical from the outside. She doesn't smile automatically anymore. She doesn't rush to soothe someone else's discomfort. She says the sentence she used to swallow. She lets silence do the work she once did with apologizing. She tells the truth without wrapping it in softness, not because she's becoming harsh, but because she's becoming whole. Jung wrote that the shadow, once integrated, doesn't destroy you. It frees you. And spiritually awakened women know, before they can rise into their light, they must reclaim the truths they once buried in the dark. Take a breath. This was only the first removal. The next one cuts even deeper into the architecture of her psyche. The second thing spiritually awakened women remove is subtle, invisible, and devastating. It's the habit of distrusting their own intuition, the quiet self-doubt that turns a woman's inner knowing into background noise while the world's opinions blast like sirens. Here's the truth no one told her clearly enough. She was not born doubting herself. She was taught to. A girl's first instinct is always pure. Her body tightens around danger. Her chest expands around truth. Her breath shifts when something feels wrong. But instead of being taught to trust those sensations, she was conditioned to override them. Be nice. Don't overreact. Give him another chance. You're imagining things. Don't be dramatic. Stop being so sensitive. It's not a big deal. You're too emotional. Every time someone said those words, her intuition dimmed a little. Not because she was wrong, but because she learned that being right came with consequences. Conflict, discomfort, punishment, rejection. Jung said the psyche speaks in symbols, sensations, dreams, whispers from the unconscious. But a woman who has been trained to doubt herself learns to silence all of it. By adulthood, she can feel danger and still explain it away. She can sense dishonesty and still give the benefit of the doubt. She can perceive a truth with every cell in her body and still choose the path that betrays her just because someone else told her it was reasonable. This isn't intuition failing. This is conditioning winning. Awakening disrupts that, at first quietly, then violently. One day she realizes, every time I doubted myself, I paid the price. Every time I trusted myself, I was right. That's when the removal begins. An awakened woman stops outsourcing her wisdom. She stops looking for permission to feel what she feels. She stops asking others whether she's overreacting. She stops explaining sensations that don't need explanation. She stops letting logic bully her body. She stops dismissing the whisper that has been guiding her since before language. She starts believing herself again. This looks radical from the outside. She ends conversations the moment her body tightens. She leaves rooms where her soul feels unwelcome. She cuts ties without offering a 3-page explanation. She says no before her mind finds a reason. She honors the dream that woke her at 3 a.m. She trusts her discomfort more than someone else's charm. She chooses her inner voice over the noise of 10,000 external ones, not because she's stubborn, but because she finally remembers something sacred. The body never lies. The intuition never betrays. Only the conditioning does. And once a woman returns to her intuition, she becomes impossible to manipulate, impossible to gaslight, impossible to control, and impossible to disconnect from her path. This is the second removal, and it changes everything. Take a breath, because the third one cuts into a pattern even deeper than intuition, a wound passed down through generations. The third thing spiritually awakened women remove is ancient. It didn't start with them. It started generations before them. It's the inherited guilt of taking up space, the silent emotional inheritance passed from mother to daughter, teaching women to shrink themselves so others can expand comfortably. Jung wrote about the collective unconscious, the psychic echoes we carry without realizing it. Women inherit more than eye color and gestures. They inherit unspoken rules. Don't be too loud. Don't want too much. Don't shine too brightly. Don't make others uncomfortable. Don't take up more space than you're given. Most women don't choose this guilt. They absorb it. They breathe it. They watch the women before them live small, sacrificing dreams, opportunities, voice, truth, and they learn that survival is linked to invisibility. Awakening shatters that illusion. One day she notices the tension in her body every time she speaks her truth, the apology that rises in her throat every time she asks for something real, the guilt that follows her joy as if joy itself is a crime, and then something deeper speaks. This guilt is not mine. This is where the removal begins. An awakened woman stops apologizing for existing. She sits in her full height. She claims her desires without shrinking them. She lets her voice take up sound. She lets her truth take up air. She lets her presence take up the room without editing herself to fit someone else's comfort. She understands something her lineage never could. A woman expanding is not a threat. A woman shrinking is a tragedy, and so she becomes the first in her line to break the inherited spell. This is the third removal, shorter, quieter, but powerful enough to rewrite an entire bloodline. Take a breath. Part 5 goes even deeper into the psychology of emotional over-responsibility. The fourth thing spiritually awakened women remove is the burden they never chose to carry, but carried anyway because no one else would. It's the emotional over-responsibility that turns a woman into the unpaid therapist, the peacekeeper, the emotional shock absorber for everyone around her. Jung called this the inflation of the mother archetype, when a woman becomes so responsible for others' emotions that she forgets she has her own. And the world applauds this. They call her strong, wise, mature, the glue, the one everyone can count on. They don't see the cost. They don't see the nights she cries alone because she spent the whole day holding burdens that were never hers. They don't see how her nervous system stays on high alert, trying to predict everyone's reactions so no one ever gets upset. They don't see how she walks through life, monitoring the emotional temperature of every room like a human weather station. They don't see that she's exhausted from holding up worlds that crumble the moment she steps away. The awakening comes abruptly when she realizes a brutal truth. She is responsible for her heart, not for managing the hearts of others. And suddenly, the removal begins. She stops cushioning her no so others don't feel rejected. She stops rewriting her boundaries just to avoid someone's disappointment. She stops making excuses for people who should be accountable for themselves. She stops interpreting, absorbing, softening, explaining. She stops doing the emotional labor that adults should do for themselves. Instead, she hands back the weight she has carried for too long, not angrily, not dramatically, just truthfully, and people feel the shift. Some get uncomfortable because they were benefiting from her overfunctioning, but those who are meant to stay, adjust, breathe, rise to their own responsibilities. Jung said individuation requires withdrawing the projections of others and withdrawing your own. An awakened woman does both. This is the fourth removal, the moment her emotional freedom begins. Take a breath. Part 6 goes even deeper into the illusions she once believed were love. The fifth thing spiritually awakened women remove is one of the hardest illusions to let go of, because it felt like destiny, like a sign, like fate disguised as a person. They remove the illusion of spiritual connection that was never love. Before awakening, intensity can feel like depth. Chaos can feel like chemistry. Anxiety can feel like intuition. And projection can feel like soulmate energy. Jung warned about this. He wrote that the unconscious doesn't just hide wounds. It chooses people to mirror them. The psyche calls this love. Reality calls this projection. And many women mistake this projection for a spiritual bond. The late-night synchronicities, the electric eye contact, the sense of "I've known him forever," the emotional highs that feel like transcendence, and the lows that feel like death. The belief that the universe is orchestrating a story when, in truth, her nervous system is replaying a wound. Awakened women eventually see it clearly. It wasn't a spiritual connection. It was a trauma resonance. It wasn't intuition. It was anxiety dressed as prophecy. It wasn't fate. It was a mirror of everything she hadn't healed yet. And that realization breaks the spell. She stops calling inconsistency divine timing. She stops excusing emotional unavailability as his journey. She stops interpreting red flags as lessons the universe wants me to learn. She stops mistaking intensity for intimacy. She stops confusing longing with love. And something inside her finally unclenches, because she understands a connection that destabilizes your soul is not sacred. It's familiar, and familiarity is not destiny. Then the removal happens gently. She steps back from the person who was never a soulmate, just a symbol, a messenger, a mirror she no longer needs. Jung said the moment you withdraw a projection, you reclaim your power, and an awakened woman does exactly that. She doesn't chase signs anymore, she chooses truth. This is the fifth removal, the moment love becomes real. Slow down. Part 7 goes deeper, into the patterns she no longer allows in herself. The sixth thing spiritually awakened women remove isn't external at all. It's the most intimate enemy she's ever known, the inner voice that punishes her for every flaw, every emotion, every human moment. This voice doesn't start as cruelty, it starts as protection, a way to stay acceptable, a way to avoid rejection, a way to feel in control of a world that never felt safe for her softness. But over time, it mutates. It becomes the internalized critic that comments on everything she does, the voice that tells her she's not enough, not doing enough, not healing fast enough, not evolving gracefully enough, not spiritual enough. Even in her pain, Jung called this the negative animus, the part of the psyche that turns inward and attacks the woman it was meant to guide. And society feeds this voice. It rewards perfection. It applauds self-sacrifice. It celebrates productivity over peace. It teaches women to be endlessly self-surveilling, self-correcting, self-blaming. But awakening breaks that spell. One day, she notices that she speaks to herself in a tone she would never use on a child, a friend, a lover. She hears the violence in her own thoughts. She feels the bruises left by years of internal battles she never named. And something inside whispers, "I refuse to be my own oppressor." This is where the removal begins. She stops treating mistakes as moral failures. She stops narrating her life like a courtroom. She stops expecting superhuman resilience from a human body. She stops attacking herself for emotions she was never allowed to feel. She replaces self-surveillance with self-observation, self-blame with self-understanding, self-punishment with self-honesty. This isn't softness, this is sovereignty, because a woman who no longer fears her own inner world becomes unstoppable in the outer one. Let that settle inside you for a moment. Part 8 goes even deeper, into the emotional loops she will never enter again. The seventh thing spiritually awakened women remove is the set of emotional cycles she kept returning to, even when they were breaking her, not because she was weak, not because she lacked awareness, but because the psyche repeats what it hopes to finally resolve. Jung called these patterns complexes, old wounds with their own gravity, pulling a woman back into the same dynamics, with different faces, different names, but the same emotional outcome. For years, she didn't see the pattern. She just felt the familiarity, the same conversations where she silenced her truth, the same relationships where she gave more than she received, the same friendships where she became the emotional anchor, the same moments where she abandoned herself to keep a connection alive, the same internal promise, "Next time I'll choose differently." And yet, the next time never arrived, because unhealed wounds don't vanish, they reenact. Awakening brings the first rupture. One day, she feels an eerie déjà vu, a sinking sensation that says, "I've lived this pain before." And instead of blaming herself, she understands, it's not who she is, it's what she learned to survive. That changes everything. She stops romanticizing inconsistency. She stops negotiating with red flags. She stops confusing intensity for connection. She stops calling self-sacrifice love. She stops returning to the familiar simply because it feels like home. And then something radical happens. She breaks the loop, calmly, quietly, without needing closure or permission. She steps out of the script she's been reciting her whole life and writes a new one with a single decision: never again. This isn't avoidance, it's evolution. The moment she chooses her future over her history. Let this truth settle gently in your chest. Part 9 will take us to the most subtle pattern of all, the one that hides under the disguise of strength. The eighth thing spiritually awakened women remove is something the world has always praised them for: their strength. Not real strength, but the armor of hyper-independence they were forced to build. just to survive. On the outside, she looked unshakable, unbothered, self-sufficient, the woman who handled everything alone, carried everything alone, endured everything alone. People admired her resilience. They never questioned the cost. Hyperindependence is not confidence, it's fear wearing a crown. Jung called this the fortified ego, the self that protects its wounds with steel walls, believing that intimacy is danger and vulnerability is exposure. And where does this armor come from? From the moments she needed support and no one came. From the times she cried and someone told her to toughen up. From the relationships where dependence was punished. From the childhood where she learned that needing nothing was safer than needing the wrong person, so she built a fortress and called it self-reliance. But awakening confronts her with a truth she's avoided for years. The same walls that protect you also imprison you. She starts noticing the emptiness in being the strong one all the time, the loneliness in not letting anyone see her cracks, the exhaustion of carrying a life that was meant to be shared. And then the shift begins. She lets someone help her, just a little. She tells the truth about how she feels, even when her voice trembles. She allows softness without apologizing for it. She allows closeness without bracing for impact. She allows herself to be held instead of always holding, not because she's become weak, but because she has finally understood that strength without intimacy is just another form of self-abandonment. Let that truth move quietly through you. Part 10 will bring us to the final removal, the one that frees her life completely. The ninth and final thing spiritually awakened women remove is the quietest fear, the most paralyzing one, the one she almost never names out loud, the fear of living the life that is truly hers, not the life she was told to want, not the life that earns approval, not the life that keeps the peace, not the life that looks impressive from the outside, but the life her soul has been whispering about since she was young enough to still hear herself clearly. Jung said the greatest tragedy of a human being is not the wounds they carry, but the life they never lived because they were too afraid to disappoint the world around them. This fear hides well. It disguises itself as practicality, as responsibility, as being realistic, as not wanting to be selfish, as waiting for the right time. But awakening exposes the truth. She wasn't scared of failure. She was scared of freedom. Because real freedom requires choosing. And choosing requires courage. And courage requires becoming someone her old world may no longer understand. The moment she realizes this, everything inside her rearranges. She stops postponing the dream her heart keeps circling back to. She stops trying to justify her desires to people who have never met her true self. She stops shrinking her life to fit the expectations of those who benefit from her staying small. She stops asking for permission to take a path only she can walk. Instead, she steps toward the life that has been calling her for years, the unlived one, the honest one, the sacred one, not dramatically, not recklessly, but with a quiet, grounded certainty that feels like destiny remembering her name. Because the final awakening is this: the life she longs for is the life she was born for, and removing the fear of living it is the moment she becomes whole. Let that land softly in your chest. A new chapter begins the moment she chooses it. Awakening is not a performance. It's not a highlight reel. It's not a transformation you broadcast. It's a return, a remembering, a reclaiming of the woman you were before the world told you who to be. Removing these 9 things doesn't make her perfect. It makes her real, real in a way that feels both terrifying and holy. Because once the masks fall, once the inherited guilt dissolves, once she stops fighting herself, once she stops abandoning her intuition, once she stops carrying the emotions of everyone else, once she breaks the patterns that repeated like a curse, once she softens her armor, once she chooses the life that is actually hers, she doesn't become a new woman, she becomes a free one. Jung wrote that the most powerful act of a lifetime is the integration of the self. The moment you stop living from conditioning and start living from truth, that is what she steps into now, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the grounded certainty that comes from a soul no longer diluted, a heart no longer apologizing, a life no longer borrowed. So if something in these 9 removals stirred a truth in your chest, if something inside you whispered, "That's me," if your intuition felt a pulse of recognition, trust that. It means you're not just watching a video. You're standing at the doorway of your own rebirth. And here's your invitation. Don't let this be the moment you walk away unchanged. Let it be the moment you begin. If this resonated with you, if you felt seen, understood, or awakened in any way, then stay with this journey. Share this with the women who need to hear it. And if you want more guidance, more depth, more truth that cuts through the noise, make sure you're subscribed, because this is only the beginning of the life you were always meant to live. And I'll be here to walk this path with you. Let this be the day you return to yourself.